Hello and welcome to a new feature of Practical IT with Jeremy Leik. Joining us on this video is a special guest. He runs the PE for Doers YouTube channel, and his name is David Rivera. Welcome, David.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you tonight?
Doing good. Just glad we were able to finally get together and have a little talk.
Absolutely. So my day got a little bit away from me, so I don't have a lot of prepared questions for you.
Okay. Well, we could just chat. That's okay too.
I guess, as they say, the road to hell is paved in good intentions.
Well, I mean, some of the best pieces of the movies I've ever seen were ones that were ad-libbed.
Absolutely.
Those are some of the best ones. Matter of fact, there's a couple of movies that are notable about that. Denzel Washington and Inside Man.
Mm-hmm.
Half of his dialogue, I understand, was ad-libbed. And it's the stuff you remember, too.
I believe it. I think I've heard that a lot of I'm not sure if it was Gene Wilder or the black gentleman in Blazing Saddles improvised a lot of their parts as well.
Yeah, I believe it. Gene Wilder was known for that too. Yeah.
So, and that's a movie. Well, you couldn't make it today, but it certainly pushed some limits of its day.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah.
So, I did get out something special to show off tonight.
Okay. Wow, you're a Tandy 120. Yeah, I remember those.
The first computer I bought with my own money. 1989. I got this. I spent the whole summer bagging groceries for $2.85 an hour to get that.
Yeah, mine goes back a little bit further, as I indicated in an email. It was it was called a Heathkit H8.
Okay.
I guess the H was for Heathkit. I never knew that, but the 8 was for 8-bit, and it was actually an Intel 8088, an Intel 8088 processor in it. And I upgraded that to as far as you could do it. I mean, it came with, I think, 8K of memory, and I kept adding to it very quickly. I tend to get a little carried away with these things sometimes. And I got up to 48K, which was an enormous amount of memory, very quickly.
Right.
It had a little front panel. You could actually program it through a keypad.
Okay.
Sort of like the PDP-11 equipment that I used to work on. That's why I liked it. You could actually type in the machine code and then execute it. And I did a couple of programs that way.
Oh, very nice.
Because I was in my undergraduate shortly after I bought it. I started my undergraduate, and one of the courses we had to take was microcomputers, and they went through the Intel assembler, which I hated. I hated writing in that assembler, only because the job that I had in the beginning part before I went to undergraduate was as a technician for a company called Digital Equipment Corporation.
Oh, yes.
And they sold a PDP-11. And as a technician, we had to know the assembler language inside and out, and the machine language, mostly the machine language, because we didn't generally have access to an assembler out in the field. So if we had to key in a little diagnostic, there was several of them that we had written up.
Right.
They took maybe about 50 or 60 machine language instructions in PDP-11.
Sure.
And we would key those in. And sometimes I would take them. I got to know the machine language pretty good, and I would make adjustments to it, like put an extra jump here or there, you know. And a later job that I had, it was also with PDP-11. It was a company that doesn't exist anymore called Paraphonics. And they hired me as a software support engineer, even though I didn't have my bachelor's degree yet. I was still working on it. but I was studying computer. Well, let me see. The name of this degree was a strange one. They've completely changed now. The same school, New York Institute of Technology. At the time, it was called Electromechanical Computer Technology.
Oh wow, that's a
And
mouthful.
it was also wasn't a BS or a BA. It was a BT degree, Bachelor of Technology. Right. So now they still teach that course, but now they've changed it to a BS. They really didn't change the curriculum. And I know this only because when I was applying for my PE license, before you take the first test called the Fundamentals of Engineering, and I didn't do that too far back. I did the both the FE and then the PE exam back to back almost. It was 2017. Only 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago. And I took the FE exam, which is the first part of it, called the Fundamentals of Engineering. By the way, I thought that was the hardest part. It was a 5-hour and 20-minute test.
Oh, wow.
And I had to reteach myself calculus from 27 years earlier. That's the last time I studied that stuff. And there was a lot of that on it, if not pure out calculus type problems, but it was also blended in a lot of the electrical engineering problems that they had in there.
Sure.
And I still remember that test almost killed me, I thought, but I wound up passing it to my surprise in December of 2017. And then I went right out, and I still remember this because, at that point I was well over 50 already. And that was unheard of for somebody to even try to attempt that test at that age. So when I sent out the email to my vice president, which by the way was a classmate of mine, as well as a friend of mine, until he got promoted 3 times before I got promoted, I sent him an email. I copied my boss at the time as well, a director, and he came right to my office and congratulated me in person, because he was right there on the same floor at the time. He had 2 offices. I was in the White Plains office of the company I worked for. I don't want to name the company. They're sort of touchy about that. But because, matter of fact, I had to get this cleared to do YouTube with them.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things I can't do is advertise the organization. I can't present myself as an employee of that company.
Right.
I had to sign a document to that. And also I cannot use any of their resources, which I never was going to use, but
sure.
They even consider their resources employees. So I can't even advertise my channel to fellow coworkers.
Wow.
Although some of them found me on their own. So if they do that and they come and approach me, as long as, we can take a break or it's during lunch or after work, no problem with doing that. So that's I have several of my coworkers that are subscribers of mine, but not a lot. I don't advertise it there, obviously. But it was so interesting because when I took that test and he came right over and he congratulated me, he said, okay, well, when are you going to take the PE part, which is the part 2? Now, normally a person takes the FE while they're a senior in engineering school. And then they wind up, you have to get 4 years experience before you can take part 2.
Gotcha.
I didn't need that. I had already been cleared for both tests because I was able to get credit for all the years as a software engineer. And those counted because I was, that's an engineering discipline. They even had 2 different tests because the part 1, at the time, there was only 6 tests. And the one that was electrical was for anybody doing general electronics, like if you're building transmitters, or if you wanted to go for power. So if you're interested in power generation or power transmission at the high end, where you're working for a company that's what they do, like a power company. And then the 3rd test in that same grouping was computer engineering. And computer engineering, it was an interesting one. It was a perfect one for me too, because it was 40% electronics and electrical engineering, 40% software and programming, and 20% security, which is my credentials are right there. In addition to everything else, I have my certification as a a certified information systems security professional, abbreviated CISSP. You look that up. It's been around for a while. I've had mine for 21 years now.
Okay.
That I did that when I first became a consultant. After being a programming and then a manager of a programming team, I got a job with one of the big 5 accounting firms, and I was their Unix expert. Nice. Well, actually, it was considered the smaller computer systems, non-mainframe. They already had a mainframe guy, but all of the things that were taking place when I first joined that company in the late 1990s was all becoming Unix servers. And I had just come off of several years as a developer on Unix systems, writing C code, writing device drivers, I wrote a database. I wrote our own 4th generation language.
Wow.
Believe it or not. And I worked for a bank at the time, but they had some very custom applications they wanted to do in the branch. And we had just gotten, what's the right word for it? We had just gotten taken by one of the vendors. Who suddenly dropped support for a system that was being used in the branches. Right. And we predated me by a couple of years. I joined the team a couple of years later, but we got into some really nifty stuff, and it was perfect because while I was doing that work, that's when I went for my master's degree in computer science.
Nice.
And the same projects I was doing in school as part of the computer science degree, master's degree, was the same kind of work I was doing at work. It was like the perfect fit. That was probably my best experience ever in terms of a job and my fit for that job. Of course, eventually, they wind up merging with another company, and then you wind up, all kinds of things happen after that. So, I wind up looking at other opportunities, and that's when I went into consulting.
Very nice.
And they needed somebody who knew Unix. They needed somebody who knew Unix security. And as a developer of system level code in Unix, security was part of what I had to develop for.
Right.
It wasn't a top priority. Getting the thing to work, effectively and efficiently was the number one priority. But as a manager of a development team, I had to always be concerned that our source code was secure. Mm-hmm. We had a very interesting system, workstations that we used. It was these Apollo workstations, which later got bought out by HP. And these are running a variant of System 5 Unix, the pure, from AT&T type of Unix.
Right.
Which is what I know best, by the way. And of course, I had to do Linux too. I also had to do MS-DOS programming because we didn't have Windows running on the branch teller systems. We had DOS only with 640K of memory.
Oh, wow.
And so we created our own client server environment. It was just unbelievable. That was my best period of and the first year and a half were terrible. The last year and a half were terrible, maybe the last year. But the middle 4.5 years was the best job I ever had. I still think back to that. That was great. I was working late. And I had small children at home too, which, caused some issues there. But I loved doing that work. I would stay late coding and especially when I had a team reporting to me, I had a really good team. They worked well and we all worked together very closely. And I wasn't just a manager who sat there and told people what to do. I go by, by many other great leaders in history. You lead from the front.
Absolutely.
So I would be doing my own code. As well as, so I was assigned myself something in addition to whatever I had my team work on. And if they ran into problems, I had skill sets that crossed most of the disciplines. I did have this one person, this one woman in the group who was really, really good. So it was difficult helping her because she really knew her stuff. But there were things I could help her with, especially since English wasn't her first language. So that was part of it. But the long and short of it is I could have done that. I could have done that professional engineering degree license a long time ago, but it wasn't something that those jobs required. But the job I'm in now, it's a big deal. It is a big deal. So you even get a bonus every year. I don't know if we're going to get it this year. It sounds like we're not because of, the COVID-19 stuff, but
sure.
And they wound up holding, I don't know if we're even going to get our raises for this year either because of that. because there was extra expenses the company had to incur to deal with all of what was going on.
Right.
But they used to take the previous 2 years to this. I got a bonus for just having my PE license.
Wow.
A nice little extra check you get once a year. You know, it came out to about 60% of a paycheck, and my paycheck is like every 2 weeks.
Right.
So you don't complain about that.
No, not at all.
No, it was, you know. But I still remember when my VP, who was also, like I said, a friend of mine, he says, after he came to congratulate me on passing the first part, and he asked me, how many attempts did it take? And I just lucked out. I got it on the first shot. I mean, I studied hard.
Right.
I was up late night. You know, it was a study discipline that I learned just a couple of years earlier, because I had just graduated from an internal MBA program that the company had. And I was one of the people who was lucky enough to get into the inaugural group of MBA students.
Nice.
Completely paid for by the company. They even gave us Fridays off whenever the classes had to be held in person. And they even provided all of the office space for the classes. So the professors came to us at our job in White Plains. And it was very convenient, but it was still I mean, I never, especially since it's not really my skill set, the types of material you cover in an MBA. I did very well in the technical subjects like, you know, finance and Excel. Sure. You know, I actually wrote macros when I didn't even have to in Excel to make the projects work better. As a matter of fact, I'm going to probably do some videos on that, you know, on the macros that I created and how to create those macros to do some very sophisticated thing. I haven't planned it out yet, but I think I would want to, you know, show the macros I did. Mm-hmm. And I pretty much did the whole thing. I mean, I had my team helping in terms of some of the formulas we had to do. But I was the one that implemented all the coding of it. It's all written in a pretty simple language, Visual Basic. So it's not that hard. Yeah. It's not that fast either, but it works amazingly well. And so I was going to show those programs first, and then start showing people, you know, maybe make a series out of it. Show people how to do some macro programming, and also you learn Visual Basic out of that as well.
Yep.
Which is not bad to learn, you know. But I still remember that when he asked me, so you one time, I said, yeah, one time. He goes, wow, that's unusual. I said, well, I worked hard at it, as you know. And he was also in the same MBA program, that VP. So we were actually teammates for a couple of the modules of training that we went through. And we worked together. We were in the same group as well at the time. We were co-managers within the group. And so he said, so when are you going to take the PE exam? And I said, the very next time I can take it in April. So this was December. And I told him, I'm going to take it in April. He says, really? You're just going to take a shot at it? I said, no, I've been studying for that all along. You know, I was doing in parallel both parts of the test.
Right, right.
You know, he says, I never heard of anybody passing it that quickly. I said to him, and it just slipped out. I said, I tell you what, I wouldn't bet against me. And to my amazement, I passed that one the first time too. So that was a recent major professional accomplishment. But just 2 years before that, like I said, I finished the MBA. So now I got, you know, my master's in computer science. That's from over 20 years ago. And then I got my MBA, and now I got my PE license.
Nice.
And now I just hope that the YouTube can be more successful so that I can, you know, maybe retire a little bit earlier than I was originally planning. That would be nice.
Yeah.
So anyway, enough about me. Oh, can I make a nameless plug here for my channel? Although I put it up
Absolutely.
as my name. So I made myself a printout here. Come visit my channel. I take all subscribers and I answer all questions.
Right on.
So anyway, that's enough about me. Maybe you can, you know, give one of your famous accomplishments or stories that you like to do.
Well, I strayed off the beaten path a little bit. I started at community college after high school, but I had some real issues with trying to get straight answers from the advisors. So I decided that I was better off going to work full time and getting some life experience. Ended up working for I spent 6 years running a video store, which was interesting for a while, right at the beginning of DVDs coming on the market.
Did they sell computers too? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you.
No, they didn't sell computers. We were just renting videos. It was mostly VHS, and then I much to the chagrin of management, I started ordering a couple DVDs with every order for new movies, and before long, we had more DVDs than one of the chains, which was kind of a nice accomplishment. After that job, I went to work for a Fortune 500 insurance company as a data entry clerk, basically. Did that for 2 years, and they told me that I wasn't going to get anywhere without a degree. So I said, sayonara, I'm going back to school. So I went, at 30, I went back to school, got my bachelor's degree in information technology with a concentration in networking, and then graduated into prior to COVID, it was the worst economy since the Great Depression, in 2008. And so I rolled right into a master's program and finished that up in 2012 while I was working full time. I went back to the same insurance company, but with a degree, they let you in the door, and I was able to go into their software testing department. And just a few months prior to my arrival there, they had entered into an agreement with an HP subsidiary that offered a product called Quick Test Professional, which has now been renamed to Functional Testing something or another. But it's an automated testing suite built on top of VB Script, which is a dumbed down version of Visual Basic. And I was quickly able to work my way to the limits of that language and their very, very limited object orientation implementation. But I guess my claim to fame on that job was my very last project. Of course, insurance companies are still running mainframes. So my last big project, was to use a script that I built in Quick Test Professional to change, I don't know if it was 10 or 20,000 records on the mainframe, because all the mainframe programmers were busy with other projects. And my brain and COBOL did not mesh well together. So
I know the feeling. I tried that once myself early on in my career.
Yeah. And I've heard after I left that insurance company that they hired the former COBOL instructor from the local community college to have on staff to teach new employees COBOL. And funny enough, this same lady, she actually had worked at Bell Labs. She was my instructor for an intro to, what they call the class? Intro to Linux, or Intro to Unix using Linux. And I guess that was the other prop that I got out. I've still got the book. And it's got... I've taken the disc out.
I got a really old one too. Let me get something there. The programming manual for my Atari ST.
Oh wow!
The C language I bought for that.
Very nice.
And, I actually did C coding in it. It worked fine, but then when I went to graduate school, they didn't want me to use C. They wanted us to use Pascal.
Okay.
So I had to go and buy a Pascal compiler for it, which I
All
still
right.
like to hook up there too. I keep all books like that, just in case. So I got a lot of props back in here. I put them. This is my newly renovated studio here.
Very
So,
nice.
as a matter of fact, a video's coming out probably before you air this one. I probably think, depending on when you air this, because mine is coming out tomorrow morning at
Yeah,
7:45 in the morning.
I'll probably have this out on Friday.
Right.
Um,
But I
I've
show
got.
how I renovated the studio and how I cleaned it all out. So much junk. I mean, it took, those contractor garbage bags?
Mm-hmm.
It actually took 6 of those
Oh
to
my
get all the
gosh.
stuff that I threw out. I must have thrown out about 1,000 floppy disk, the
Wow.
3.5-inch floppy disk that I had, and they weren't originals. I kept any original software because you
Sure.
never know, that might have a value someday. But that was all copied software that I had
Okay.
copied onto these, and I put nice labels on them.
Mm-hmm.
I owned a color laser a long time back, and I would print out laser labels for them. It was really nice, but I trashed all of that in the last week because it was just accumulating dust. I would never load that again, even though somewhere around here I have a 3.5-inch floppy drive, I think up in my junk cable box up there.
Right.
You never know when you might need it. Matter of fact, I still got a bunch of 3.5-inch floppies. And while I was cleaning up, I found a 5.25-inch floppy drive.
Wow.
For a computer that I built that I must have taken out before I threw the computer out, that I built like 25 years ago.
Wow.
Because I remember that was a big deal when I was building computers in the mid 90s. I would put both a 5.25 and a 3.5-inch floppy into these. I went to these computer shows and bought parts and put these things together. And then I would keep upgrading my computers. And then I would have extra parts. And I wound up then building extra computers. Like I built computers for my kids,
Right.
My wife, and everybody. I didn't buy one for every kid, but each kid's bedroom, I had a girl's room and a boy's room.
Mm-hmm.
And then my wife in the bedroom, I built computers for them all. I just kept going to the computer shows. That was my addiction back then. And then I wound up, as I upgrade, you wind up with extra parts, just like now.
Right.
And I would build computers for friends. I never sold one. I just built them for other people and gave them away with the parts that I no longer needed, monitors that I had relegated to the back room, But it's a long journey I went through on this. So it's YouTube sort of brings back a lot of that and my opportunities for it. So
oh yeah,
I didn't mean to disturb you or interrupt you there.
So so I guess 2012 I graduated with my master's. I did that completely online through Capella University. And so my master's is in information assurance and security.
Oh, good.
So, and so after I completed the master's, I ended up teaching IT courses at a vocational college for about 3.5 years. And then the campus I was working at, they were winding down the program because they didn't have a high enough enrollment. So I ended up being let go from that and did odd jobs for about a year, different computer consulting things that I could pick up here and there. And then about a year ago now, I started working at a small library as their technology coordinator. So
yeah, I saw you mention that in your video, one of your other videos. Yeah,
that's it's been an interesting run and definitely tested some of my capabilities along the way. I didn't expect about a month and a half in to have a hard drive in the server fail on me and discover that my predecessor had left me no backups. So, there was a period of scrambling for a while there, but everything seems to be humming along nicely now. And I do now it's bi-weekly online tech support meeting through the library. just to have people come in and ask questions. And ironically, I guess, I've had people from Washington State. I've had people from some of the southern states, but not a whole lot from the community where the library is. So we'll see how that changes now that school is getting back into session around here, and I know they're having some technical difficulties with some of the new equipment and things that they've brought in, and some of their hotspots aren't working properly, and it's a situation I really feel for the parents, the teachers, and the students in this period of time we're in. And I'm just sure glad that my schooling is done at the moment. So just to circle back, I guess the first computer my parents bought was a Coleco Atom computer.
Yeah, I heard that one. I never saw one live, but I heard about them.
Yep. They had 48K of RAM.
Oh, compete with my Heathkit.
Right. And so the ColecoVision console was based on a pre-release version of the MSX computer specification that was only ever released in Japan.
MSX.
It was a Microsoft Asia project.
Was that the software or the processor chip?
It was the software. So it was a home computer series, and companies like Panasonic and I think Sony had built some of them as well. But it was an early attempt at creating a standardized computer platform, more so than what DOS was in the same time period, because there were, still the 100% compatibles, and then the Tandies and others that strayed from the fold a little bit.
Yeah, I had to deal with it professionally when we were doing the coding for that bank I worked for. Part of the project was because of the merger that had just occurred. And that's the reason that the project went into high gear, because now we had to prove that our architecture was better, even though we were in, at that point, we were in maybe 30 branches out of 250 that we had. And that was the bank that I belonged to, which doesn't exist anymore. It was called Manufacturers Hanover Trust. Okay. And then we merged with Chemical Bank. And Chemical Bank had about the same number of branches. And they were all based on DEC VAX technology, running VMS. Mm-hmm. And we were using Unix. But we had made our software so portable that just for the heck of it, we went ahead and we had already ported it to 2 other operating systems. We had ported it to 4 different versions of Unix. We had HP Unix, we had SCO Unix, which I really liked. The SCO Unix, SCO Unix.
Yep.
I still have the books around here for it. I think I kept those because I have the originals. And we also ported it to there was HP, there was DEC, there was IBM was the one that presented their compatible at the time. And we're talking here like it was, I guess 1994 was around the time when we did that. And a company called NCR, which probably still has pictures of my face with bullseyes on it or dartboards, because me and them did not get along. I was the manager of the development team for this software, and they were trying to stick us, and they were the same company that stuck us with the other architecture that they suddenly dropped. Right. Now they're trying to stick us with another proprietary architecture, and it was running on a modified version of Sys5 Unix that NCR had modified. But more importantly than that, they carried over the IBM microchannel technology.
Oh, wow.
Which was really bad. Yeah. I mean, even IBM had already dropped it, but yet NCR had invested so much into it, they wouldn't back out of it. And
Wow.
it was bad, and of course there was some finagle. I don't want to give the details of that. Somebody might get a little upset if they work for this, but chances are they wouldn't remember this anyway. But somehow NCR won the contract and were able to outfit 500 branches with new Unix servers and new workstations, and a branch had little small workstations with little 9-inch black and white monitors for the tellers. Oof. And then they had the platform stations, which were regular PCs that the loan officers would use. So all of those would then talk to the back-end Unix server through a client-server mechanism that my team developed. And It was, we made our own inter-process communication, really, because we wanted it customized to be most efficient with this 4th generation language that we had written. And it was an amazing project, like I said. So the matter of fact, that was so good that it lasted for 16 years after I left the company.
Wow.
We had a reunion. Just in the year that they were going to finally retire that one. And some of the people that I had worked with, they all showed up to the reunion. I was still working for the combined bank. Me and about half the people that were there had long left. But it was an interesting thing because it made you feel proud that we did something that was so solid,
right,
that they couldn't find a replacement for it. And it was easy to port. That was our important thing. That's why we were able to win the competition against Chemical Bank, who were using basically proprietary VMS to write their applications. And they used extensions to VMS for the financial services industry. So they were locked into this product line, with DEC. And it really didn't bode well for them, because we were able to, in the time it took, we were given about 9 months before they were going to do a head-to-head competition between the systems. Well, our system was up and running. Well, so was theirs, but they were still working on some enhancements. What we did in that 9 months is we didn't have to do anything further on the hardware we had. It was working fine. It was running in 30 branches. But what we did is we took our software and we ported it to VMS. It was and that was a big push, because if we could port our software to VMS, now there's an argument for not buying new hardware for the existing chemical branches. Now, the VMS machines was new to them too, so they only had that rolled out in about 50 branches, and they were looking to eventually roll out that for the remaining 200 branches that they had. But we came in, and when they did the head-to-head, we even invited them in. We were kind about it. They didn't invite us into their lab. We invited them into ours to show them what we had done. And so we had the actual application that we had in our branches running with an X-Station workstation and a small PC that was the same one we were using with our tellers, connected TCP/IP, of course, to the VMS box, running our server component of the software, because it was real client server. The application was actually split. Since the printers were attached to the server, anything that did printing that code existed on the server, so it ran at maximum speed.
Right.
But anything that had to do with user interface was on the workstation. And we made it very fast. And the initial version of it that went out in the first 3 branches didn't run that well. But then we started moving modules back and forth between the two, client and server, and we got it to run very fast. And we blew them away. Matter of fact, when we invited them to the lab, their development team, my counterparts for them, the manager immediately put her VMS expert, "Do you mind if we take a look at it?" Because we showed him how it worked. And I think they thought that we were just doing, a screen scrape of one of their machines.
Right.
And it was really a Unix machine in the back end running. I think that's what they thought, because he got onto it. He says, "Do you mind if I get on as an administrator?" I said, "Not at all." I logged him as an administrator, just so we could see that we really had our application running. And then you could see the look on his face and the way his jaw dropped when he realized that it really was running on that machine. Because they couldn't do that to us. They couldn't do that with our software.
Right.
They just could not. They could not have ported their stuff over to Unix. They were tied into too many of the VMS extensions. Now, VMS was a good machine, but it was very restricted. It was very proprietary.
Right.
And our whole goal of our project was to not be tied into anything proprietary anymore. If we stuck to the minimum Unix system calls, we created a layer that actually went between the application layers and the operating system. And all we had to do to port it was modify that layer. And that's all we had to do to get it to run not only on VMS, but we had it running on OS2. Now, OS2 was part of our architecture anyway, but it was being used as a interface to our mainframe. So these Unix servers, they had to, at the end of the day, batch upload all of the transactions and financials up to a mainframe somewhere in our data center, one of our data centers. We actually had two of them, one in New Jersey and one in Manhattan. And so we had these little boxes, they were running OS2, and they were running software that was provided by IBM that we had apparently modified. At least somebody who worked for the bank had modified. We took over that modification, my team. So we actually went to school on OS2. We went to Microsoft training on how to code in OS2. I have a book over here that talks about writing OS2 device drivers because we had to rewrite some device drivers to get that to work. So they didn't, their base level system call, they were missing a few of the Unix commands that we needed.
Sure.
So we had the right device drivers for that in order to get it to work. So like I said, it was just an amazing project. It's probably the proudest moment in my career, let alone my software development career.
Right.
To have something like that I knew I accomplished. And I would do it again in a minute if I could. I don't know if I have the skill set in C programming like I used to. It's a losable skill set after a few years.
Right, but, right.
I think I would pick it up fast enough. But sorry for wasting so much.
Oh no, this is
because that's something that I'm proud of more than anything else.
This has been great because actually the first. The first class I had at the community college after high school was an intro to computer science, and our community college had a DEC VAX. So I had just a little bit of experience on that. I think before the time I stopped taking classes there, they had decommissioned that machine. It was feeling a little long in the tooth by 92 when I got there, but
yeah. I actually owned one for a while, a mini VAX.
Wow.
What happened was my brother-in-law, I got him the job because I originally had worked for DEC as a field service engineer before I got the job as a software support engineer in a different company. And he wound up working for a company that doesn't exist anymore. I forget the name of it, but he was out of work. And this was right around the same time. He had gotten out of the Air Force. He was in the Air Force for like 8 years. And he was married to my younger sister. And he got a job. He worked in it for a couple of years. He was doing well. And then they had a major layoff and he got laid off. So I knew that DEC was looking for people. And I had just left DEC. So I made a couple of phone calls for him and got him an interview. And they hired him, and then he really essentially did not leave DEC since then. What happened was DEC got bought out by Compaq. So he wound up changing company names from DEC to Compaq, and then that eventually got bought out by HP.
Right.
And I think they call it Unisys. So it's been changing owners. He's gone through like 4 owners. He still works for them today as a computer technician, repairing that mid-range type of business system.
Right.
Because they still have them out there. They don't run DEC VAXs anymore, but it was an interesting one. And also earlier in my career, when I first right around the time when I finished my master's in computer science. I still remember this because a long story I won't go into with the head of the computer science department. But as I'm on commencement line and I go to graduations, I want to put the robes on and all of that. I like the pomp and circumstance of it, right? I earned it, I figure, right?
Right.
And so I go to those graduations. I did it all the way along. And the director of the computer science program, which I had for 2 courses, so 2 of my 12 courses that I had to take to earn my computer science master's degree, he was the professor in them. And one of them was a project course. And in the project course, you had to present. Now, it just so happened I was very lucky. The job I had, part of my job was teaching company software courses.
Nice.
I had no experience in that. Matter of fact, I didn't even have a degree in it when I was doing it. I was still trying to earn my bachelor's degree when I first got that job. But it gave me a lot of practice on presenting and teaching people things, which is a skill I carry over today, even into my YouTube channel. Absolutely. I like teaching people things and going over things. And I try to go over as much detail as I think they need. And I only did it for 2 semesters, but he approaches me on the commencement line, the head of the computer science, and he says, "Hey, would you like to get a job, a part-time job with me?" I said, "Doing what?" And like we're marching towards the podium, and he's standing right next to me. He goes, "I'd like to get you in as an adjunct."
Hey.
And I said, "Really? What courses?" He goes, "I want you to teach the 2 optional. I want you to teach one of the optional computer science master's courses." Now, these were courses I didn't have to take. So that school, and I think a lot of schools did it, they would, if you came in with a miscellaneous bachelor's degree, like there were people that would go for computer science that had a degree in, English, or a degree in meteorology or something like that. But they didn't have a computer-related or electronic-related degree. They had to take 3 extra courses that counted as credit and were averaged in with their other computer science graduate courses. They were graduate-level courses. And I wound up teaching the one on programming languages because he knew that was my profession at the time. I was a programmer. And he got to see the program that I wrote as my project. And, it was professionally done, believe me. But also when I presented my results of my project, you present it in front of the class, I did that like a teacher. So I guess that impressed him enough to where he thought he should hire me. That was an interesting time, but my job was just traveling too much. And that takes a lot of time.
Oh,
being
yeah.
an instructor, an adjunct instructor even. I mean, they paid... I don't think I made minimum wage when you add everything into it, right? They gave you a fixed amount for the course, and it doesn't matter how many students you have,
right?
At least in the school I was in. And so if I wound up with classes that were pretty full, like, 25, 26 students in them, and just grading their tests and grading their assignments and all of that took a lot of time because I did it very carefully, and it just wasn't worth it. But I still wanted to do it because I like teaching. It's just that my job that I had at the time, we started traveling a lot, and it just didn't work out. I couldn't miss that many classes, as an instructor. So I had to let that go. I always forget that a little bit, but that was an interesting experience in my career also. So I have teaching credentials in a way. I did 2 semesters in a row of that, and it was graduate level work. And it was funny because 2 things surprised me about that experience. One was, I remember at the beginning, I said, "Okay, do you have a course outline that I should follow?" Because obviously they were already teaching this course, because I could have wound up taking it. He made the decision. He was the same guy that when you went to matriculate, you had to bring him your credentials, your undergraduate transcript, and anything else you did that explains what your experience is. So I brought him like a book. I had not just my resume. I had my resume in there. I had my grades. I had a couple of letters of commendation from my electronics professor that I got along with very well. who I had for like 3 courses. And so he said, I never had anybody from the Bachelor of Technology program, though, go right in to the computer science. He goes, you're going to have to take the calculus courses. Now, he didn't read the resume. He didn't read the transcript. I had taken the calculus courses. They had these things. They had these courses, and they still have it today, even in the program that they offer now that they call a BS degree. They call them Technical Math 1, Technical Math 2, Technical Math 3, and Technical Math 4. And 2 of them were not even three credits, and 2 of them were only 2.5 credits. So what I did was, when I realized early on, and I think it was in my first semester or 2 of my undergraduate, that I would go for my master's degree, I saw that was a requirement for the master's degree. So what I did is I went to the department head of my undergraduate degree, and I said, I'd like permission to substitute regular calculus courses in for the Tech Math 1. Matter of fact, Tech Math 1 was algebra. It was like, 11th grade math to me. It was, I looked at the thing, and I was really good in math in high school. So I said that would be a waste of my time anyway. I was thinking about taking the validation exam, but that's a long process to get through that. So I said, can I just substitute it? He goes, yeah, those are harder courses. I said, I know, but I want to get into the master's program as soon as I can. So I'd like to take those instead. So I had taken the calculus courses instead of those. So when that head of the computer science department for the master's program said, oh, you're going to have to take the calculus course, I immediately showed him the detail of my transcript, and I said, I already did. He goes, oh yeah, you did. Wow. He goes, all A's too. And I said, absolutely. I'm not here to fool around. I think I even mumbled that, but the experience of that course I didn't have to take, that programming languages course, because my undergraduate degree covered more than that. Right. The Bachelor of Technology. I like to equate that Bachelor of Technology to, at the time, as 4 minors thrown together. It had most of the courses were electrical engineering level courses. The second tier to that was obviously some computer programming courses and general computer architecture courses. And then there was a 3rd tier and a 4th tier. The 3rd tier was mechanical engineering. I had to take thermodynamics. I had to take strength of materials. I had to take courses that you normally don't take when you're going for an electrical engineering degree, but it was required at the time. They have now substituted in more computer courses for that and took off the mechanical ones in the current layout of that program. And then the 4th part was actually a lot of management courses. So I had to take personnel administration. I had to take, courses that I think a lot of the engineering students didn't have to take, including technical math and technical writing and things like that as well. Sure. But, I viewed it as 4 minors, with the biggest minor being the electrical part of it. And but I was lucky that I didn't have to take that course or either one of the other 2, because they had 3 of them, depending on what you didn't have an undergraduate credentials in. And programming languages was no brainer at all. There was no problem. But I was a little bit concerned about one of the other ones. I forget the exact details of it, but I think it had to do with database engines or something. And that's what I was doing at work. So I was able to convince him I didn't need that. And, nice. And it worked out. I was able to just take the minimum 12 courses to get my master's in computer science. And then I wound up teaching one of those 3. I wound up teaching programming languages. And the programming languages, I went to him and I asked him, do you have a syllabus or something that I can follow? Of course, he says, I do, but I don't like it. The guy who did this it's almost 10 years ago now. It's way outdated. And we get some complaints about it. It's all assembler language in VAX and some Pascal in VAX. He goes, nobody's using Pascal anymore. Not really. Yeah. He goes, and we don't have yet, as part of our overall program, a programming course in C. I like the fact that you have C programming background. So he said, I'd like you to design a new course for me. And he said, I want you to include in it assembler. You have to cover VAX assembler. But I'll leave it up to you how you cover that. But I want you to spend like ideally 50-50 between VAX assembler and C programming. So put together your ideas and give me a course outline. So what I did is I sat and spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I created a course that was writing an assembler in C, a VAX assembler. So that's what the C program was. So it involved 2 projects. I had to give a small project, just to get people familiar with writing assembly language in VAX, but it wasn't heavy. And then I had to give the bigger project was, and I think I also asked him, well, how do I decide the grade? He said, it's totally up to you. I said, really? Is there a minimum number of tests or a maximum number of A's, a minimum number of C's? He says, nothing like that. Whatever you think is right is what I was totally shocked by that. Wow. That there was no guidelines like that. And some schools I know do have that.
Yeah.
But he did not have it. And so what I did is I mimicked a course in my undergraduate in terms of deciding the grades. And it was engineering economics, which was really handy because that helped me then with finance in the master's, the MBA program as well. It's the same concepts.
Right.
But engineering economics had a lot of formulas to it. All those financial formulas, right? Future value, present value, all that stuff that you see. And that was also on the PE, the FE exam part of it. I even made a video about that, about the techniques you should use for doing that. But I mimicked my grading philosophy after that. That professor gave, since we only had 1 class a week, 3 hours on a Saturday, the same thing that I had, 1 class a week for 3 hours. I made it so the first thing the people did starting in the second week was they got a quiz. So I gave a quiz with every class. We had 15 classes, and I would, it turned out with 11 quizzes when you count the fact I couldn't give one the first week and I can't give one the last week. And I didn't want to give one the week before the final. So it wound up with 11 of them. So I told them right off the bat from day one, although my engineering economics professor did not warn us about it, that he was going to do that philosophy. He started just giving us quizzes. He gave us no idea of how it was going to count. I wound up not having to take the final in that class because I had an A average for all the quizzes. Me and this other lady. I still remember she was a little bit, I was in my early 20s then. And when we got our last quiz back, he graded it during the break. He wrote in red on the top. And we were both nervous because normally he gave the highest grades out first. Well, he didn't give ours out to us. So we started looking at it. She was sitting right in front of me. She kept turning around looking at me, and I was looking at her. And we both worried, like we must have both messed this last quiz up, right? And then we finally, with the last 2 that he gives it to, and he writes in red, A average for course, exempt from final.
Nice.
And then he went and told the rest of the class what that meant. Anybody with, he told everybody that he would tell them the grades if they call him up during the week, right? Because the final was supposed to happen the very next week. He says, he called me up early in the week. I'm still working on some of the grades. Obviously, I've already exempted a couple of people. He didn't name us, but everybody knew from the final. And he says, I'll tell you what grade you will get if you don't show up to the final. And I'll give whatever the average is for your quizzes minus your lowest grade. So I'll average all of them and just take off your lowest grade. And if it comes out to a B, if it comes out to an A, which I think some of you will, I haven't done all of the, a couple of them were easy, but he said the other ones I have to do more calculations on. He says, then you don't, I wouldn't expect to see you because you're going to get an A by not showing up. He goes, if it's a B though, you have the choice now. You can show up and try to improve the B to an A because there was no pluses and minuses in that school at the time. He goes, or you can take the B. And if you want to do the same thing for the C, have at it. But you don't have to. He said the final is only to improve your grade. And I took that as a lesson. And that's how I ran my 2 semesters. But I told him every detail of this the first day of class. 11 quizzes. I was going to have 2 projects, a small project. The small project was going to be worth, I think, 15% of their grade. The final was going to be worth 30% of their grade, the final project. The final exam was going to be worth 20% of their grade, but that's only if you need to calculate it in.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to accept whatever the average of everything else is that I will tell you about, hopefully the week before the final, if you get all your projects in on time, because I wasn't a stickler for giving the deadlines on some of these projects. I let them give it to me whenever. So if you give it to me if I get the quizzes by the 13th, if I get the projects done by the 13th week, which is when the second one was due, then I'll be able to tell you on the 14th week whether or not what your grade would be. And that's how I ran both semesters. And it was funny because the professor, the director, the head of the department, computer science department, he said he got compliments from some of the students from me because of the way I was running the grading system. Because basically I wanted people to keep up with it.
Right.
I didn't want them to start cramming right before. There was no midterm. I could have given one, but I chose not to. It was better to give the projects and then a final optional. He says, so he even called me up and said, I got some good feedback on you, like the first semester I did it. And, but he said that the people appreciated what I was doing in terms of their grading. But then at the second semester I taught, I got a call from him, which was not a happy call. He said, I have to discuss something with you. And I said, what do you have to discuss? He goes, well, I got your grades and I didn't sign them yet. I want to talk them over with you. And I had a lot of A's in that second semester. So I said, why, did I give too many A's? He goes, nah, I don't worry about that. It's not the number of A's. He goes, but you gave one person a C. This is graduate school, right? You know what a C does to them? I said, absolutely, I know what it does to them. He goes, did you give her the chance to get improve the grade? I said, I gave her every chance. I followed my same grading philosophy. When I called her up on the 14th week to tell her what her grade was going to be, I told her it was a C. And then at the time, right after I told her that, I said, now I'm holding an extra study session the Friday night before the final. I plan on being there as late as you guys want me to be there. Because it was Saturday was the class. It started at, I think my class was at noontime. And I said, I'm willing to stay there as late as you want and go over the stuff that you want to go over with for the final. And she goes, she didn't say a word until I went through the whole thing about that. And then she goes, but I did hear you say the final's optional, right? I said, well, yeah, it is, but you got a C. You do know that a C is a problem, right? If you don't get that up by second semester, you're going to go on academic probation. She goes, well, it's okay. In the next semester, there's a course I'm pretty sure I'm going to get an A on, so that'll offset the C. I didn't know what to say. So I had to explain this to the director of the program. And he said, boy, that's unbelievable. He said, it sounds like you gave her every chance. He goes, so I'll sign it. But he called me up because of the C, not because of the number of A's that I gave. And I gave a lot. I think out of a class of 21 people, I think I gave 12 of them A's. And I had one guy, he shocked the heck out of me. When I called him up to the front and I told him all individually, I said, you have an A average, so, enjoy. He goes, can I still show up and take it? I said, well, if you want to. You can't get anything higher than an A.
Right.
He goes, yeah, but I'm interested in seeing how I would do. So I said, okay, that's fine. This guy shows up for the final. It was unbelievable. And it was funny, too, because in the first day of the class, when I was looking at everybody's credentials, he didn't need to take that course. Right. His undergraduate was in computer science. But he wanted to take it just as a refresher. So he actually signed up for it and paid the graduate school tuitions higher than undergraduate, per course. You pay, most people there are paying per course,
right?
And I was shocked by it. Anyway, I've rambled on. What time is it? I'm not even sure. An hour now. We've been a little over.
10:32 is what I've got. Yeah, that's.
I got more stories, but I'm not going to go into.
Well, I'll share a couple quick stories. When I was doing my undergraduate, when I went back to school full time, my very first course was visualbasic.net, which I'd been playing with BASIC since I was 12 years old, and so it's like, okay, well, I get to learn some new syntax, and the logic works the same. My classmates didn't seem to like me because I kind of stuck out because I was the oldest guy in the class and sat in the front row.
And that's me. I'm there with you.
And I 4-pointed all my programming classes. But the interesting thing about that class was that the professor would sit in the front of the class at his computer typing out examples for us to help illustrate and explain the code and everything. And there was one day that he was sitting at his computer and the guy fell asleep at his computer for 5 minutes. And everybody in the class was just looking at each other. It's like, what the heck do we do now?
How old was he? Was he older?
He must have been in his 60s anyways.
Okay.
So I had him for 2 semesters of visualbasic.net. Came back the second year, and my third and final programming class I had to take for the IT program was an accelerated C++ class.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I was the guy that sat in the front row and threw off the curve. And
I was hated in high school too, by the way, for the same
reason. So it was the end of that fall semester, and I was in the computer lab one day working on I had just started my final program for the course. And I had a group of 2 or 3 of my classmates come over and approach me. They had Sun Unix systems at the time.
Right.
And, I started using Linux in 97 or 98. And so I had a Linux machine in my apartment. And so I would do all the programming in C++ on the Linux machine and upload it to the Sun. And all I had to do was a few minor tweaks and recompile it, and I could submit my programs. But the rest of the guys, they were all Windows people, so they were spending a lot more time in the computer labs.
Yeah.
But I just started the final project, and 2 or 3 of the guys came over to me and they said, have you started the final project yet? I said, well, I'm just starting to write the code for it right now. I've got all the pre-work done for it, and the logic laid out, and I just need to sit down and start typing. And they all looked at me and they said, well, don't do any more work on it, because we're going to go to the professor and see if we can throw out the final program. We're still working on the last program.
Oh no.
And as fate would have it, the instructor did in fact throw out that final program from the grading scale. So I ended up with an extra week on my hands to work on, studying for the final, which, again, since I was throwing off the curve, was no big deal. But
you're a troublemaker then over there.
Apparently I was seen as such, but it was an interesting thing. And I never wanted to be a programmer, but the classes came easy to me.
Yeah, it fits in if you're good at math. I mean,
Well, and that's the funny thing. I was never good at math.
No.
The only math class that I really made click in my head on the first attempt was trig.
Well, that's a tough one.
That I did fine in, but the upper level algebra, the pre-calc, even statistics just gave me all kinds of fits.
The only one I had trouble with was they used to call it 10th grade math, and it was geometry.
Okay.
With all those proofs.
Right.
To me, those didn't have the same logic basis as regular math problems. So my mind did not click well with those proofs. So that was the only one that I had to really work at, was in 10th grade. But all the other ones, I mean, I was doing algebra. In, believe it or not, I started looking at it in 5th grade.
Oh, wow.
There's a long story behind that. I had a 5th grade teacher in elementary school, and she was a stick in the mud. And she told me early on in the year she was going to get me left back because my reading level was not high enough. Here I was in the beginning of 5th grade, and I only had the beginning of 4th grade reading level per those standardized tests.
Sure.
Now, I was already becoming an obstinate kid, even at 10 years old. So I remember I went home and I thought about it, and I went into the next day and I said, can I talk to you? And there was a period when she gave you the chance to talk to her. And I said, I have to question, I don't know if I used that word or not, but I'm wondering why you said I had to be laid off, why I had to be left back. She goes, well, that reading level is unacceptable. He says, yeah, but I look back at my papers that my parents have, and my math level is 7th grade. I mean, do you have a lot of other people here that have, and I knew they didn't, have a 7th grade math level? And she goes, well, that doesn't matter. Math is not important to me.
Well,
you know what happened then was I just kept getting better at math throughout the 5th grade. She said she was gonna leave me back, even in the middle of the 5th, right around the holidays. She said, get ready to wind up in 5th grade again next year. She was real nasty about it, I thought. And so I just studied harder. I found books on algebra because I was interested in electronics and photography.
Mm-hmm.
And I studied, and those all had some algebra to them. And so I studied that, and I was actually doing, and it was funny because when it got to the final standardized test, I wound up with a 9th grade math level at the end of the 5th grade. Wow. And I saw the results, and I knew what it was, but she had not told me otherwise, so I figured I was still going to be left back. My reading level continued to improve, but it just kept pace. So now at the end of the 5th grade, it was probably more like the beginning of 5th grade.
Sure.
In terms of the level, they did it with numbers like 5.1 meant the beginning, 5.9 meant the end. They had a whole scale to it, right?
Right.
And I was good at that too because that was just math. But so I went to her the last couple of weeks and I said, "So are you going to be my teacher again next year?" She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you told me I was getting left back into the 5th grade." She goes, "No, that's not happening." I said, "No." She goes, "No, believe it or not, they won't let me leave you back with that math level." Now, what she doesn't know was she actually tried to torpedo my math around the middle of the 5th grade. When she got, it was 5th grade, you do all the classes at the same teacher, one subject after the other, right?
Right.
Whenever she got to math, I had to leave the room. She sent me to the library. She gave me a pass and sent me, and I had to spend that 45 minutes or an hour, depending on what she planned on doing, in the library. You know what I did in the library, though, right?
Math.
So her efforts did not work. But again, there's more to that story which I won't go into.